This is Dr. Cathie Lavis, who's a professor in our horticulture department. A number of classes she's teaching, things like irrigation design and maintenance, landscape maintenance, and arboriculture, and a few others. Quite a few, so glad to have her today. This is Manoj Chhetri, a PhD student here, who's going to talk about some of his research, and I'm Wes Dyer, a PhD student as well, conducting research here at K-State. This kind of topic here is just the umbrella of water conservation. So when we think about water conservation, there's a lot of kind of byproducts of that, right? It's very important when we think about turfgrass. So things like we're going to save water, we can save money, better playability and consistency in our sports, and also just the overall health of the turfgrass. So when we manage water correctly, it's all these benefits we gain. But when we think about water conservation, there's a lot of approaches that we can take to maximize our savings. We can think about turfgrass selection. There's more drought-tolerant grasses. Manoj will talk about here, we're on a warm season turfgrass in the upper transition zone. Its inputs are much lower in regards to water. We'll talk about proper irrigation design and maintenance of our systems. And finally, how we incorporate technology into our landscape, again, to maximize our savings. But when you think about technology, it's really important to think about what are the feedback, the variables that we need to consider, again, that will save us the most amount of water. So things like looking at weather data. If it's going to rain tomorrow, is it really necessary to irrigate today? Also, looking at the canopy itself. There's a lot of apps on your phone. You can take a picture and it'll calculate percent green cover. And you can see, is that turfgrass stressing? And then finally, looking at soil moisture. And that's where Manoj, I'm going to hand it over to him and talking about that, using that technology in the landscape.
Sure, thanks. Hi everyone. So all of us know that the technology has affected a lot of us in our lives, right? Everyday lives. But when it comes to turfgrass industry and irrigations, not a lot has been done. There's so many options there, but in the industry, in terms of practice, there's a lot more to do. So with that question in mind, we have conducted a simple experiment here in this innovation Georgia grass. This whole area is the innovation Georgia grass. Under this runout shelter, we conducted an experiment for 2 years, for last 2 years. So this setup was pretty simple. We have 4 different treatments. One of was receiving irrigations like a clock-based controller would do, traditional routine where we applied 1 1/4 inch of water 3 times in a week. Okay, and another one was the ET-based controller kind of things, where we apply irrigation based on the information we obtained from weather data, and we applied 60% ET. That's what recommended for the Georgia grass, right? And another one was based on the soil moisture sensor. So we had soil moisture sensors like this one here. This is a research grade Campbell scientific sensors, and we trigger our irrigations based on the data we got from the soil moisture sensors. So this works pretty simply, like we have desirable thresholds, like upper thresholds. When the water at our site reaches above that desirable thresholds, then we will start off the irrigations, and when the soil moisture senses that the water is below the thresholds, then we will trigger the irrigations. And another one was a control where we did not apply any water. It was just a non-irrigated one. So what we found over 2 years is that we could save about 68% water by using soil moisture sensors compared to that clock-based routine irrigations. And our ET-based irrigations, that saved about 51% water. So what I'm seeing here is a lot of water savings, right? And another sensor here is the Toro sensor, which Wes has used, and he's going to talk in a bit. So these are our options here in the market. We have different sensors, and these sensors send feedback to the controller, and we can schedule our irrigations, especially in the warm season here in the Kansas conditions, how much water we can save, and is that profitable in terms of expending money in the sensors and everything. And we found, yes, that's a significant amount of water savings, and it is very promising. And one thing interesting about innovation Georgia grass here, what we found is it has a good good recovery potentials from the drought. We know that this Georgia grass in general is a drought tolerant grass, and it can tolerate good drought. and we were interested in also understanding the recovery from the drought, and on our non-irrigated plot, what we found is as soon as we started rewatering, after 2 weeks or so, it started greening up, and it was a good coverage we obtained in 2 to 3 weeks. So in our this kind of climate, we found good recovery potential of innovation Georgia grass, and that was very interesting. With that, I would like to hand over this to Dr. Lavis.
I'll make one quick comment with that, just to add, Manoj. Soil moisture sensors, again, they're going to tell us exactly what's in the soil, the water content. There's a quote by Dana Lowen from Toro. He often said, if you're not using soil moisture sensors data, it's like driving a car without a gas gauge. You just don't have an idea exactly when that plant needs water. So it's just a great tool to try to incorporate in the landscape. And like you said, we've seen 60, 70, 80% savings by using this technology. So now, to further enhance that, proper irrigation system is very important. Dr. Lavis?
Where are we with our time, Okay. Good morning. So I recognize a few former students in the crowd. Before we talk a little bit about this, I'll just say that as I look out into a crowd who's passionate about the green industry, it makes me very excited. The one thing as an educator for about 30 years now, and the program that worked with the Irrigation Association a little over 20 years ago to develop an irrigation course, one of my missions has always been to instill in our students the importance of information and sharing that information with the client and why we should be doing things correctly. There's nothing more disappointing than to see things done incorrectly in our industry. I'm not saying that our consumers or our contractors are going to be interested in selling components that might be a little bit more expensive. But my idea is we need to make sure that we let our clients make those decisions. If they don't know the difference between a non-pressure regulated sprinkler versus a pressure regulated sprinkler, we haven't done our job. They should be the ones to say, Sarah, thank you so much. I had no idea I had that option. I don't mind spending the extra money on pressure regulated sprinklers if that's what I'm going to get, savings, water conservation, and so forth. So proper design, proper understanding, and the other thing I was going to say is, our irrigation systems are only as good as how they're maintained, and you all know that. We can use all the technology in the world, but if we don't have arcs set correctly, we're not using the right components, we're mixing sprinklers, we're mixing nozzles, we're not using match precipitation rate, we're not doing anybody a favor. So what we've got here, and we're going to turn this on, is I'm not used to having a mic in my hand. I'm sorry when I'm teaching. Anybody that's had me knows I flop around the room. So what we set up here for you was we set up a display. This is actually my teaching display that was built by a student a number of years ago, Ryan Winholz, who's now in Hayes. So, and we use this for showing students, the difference between arc and radius and trajectory, and we switch out nozzles so they can really get an idea of what they're looking at. And what I'm really lucky to have is I have see-through demos, which are given to me by, Hunter, Rainbird, whoever wants to give them to me. So the students can really see the guts. And if you've never seen the guts of one of these, it's very helpful to see. It's the same thing with valves. Those are just demo. So what we've done here is we're just going to show you real quickly. These are, pop-up spray sprinklers. Okay? The one I have my hand on has the pressure regulator in the stem. So this is pressure regulated to 30 psi, the optimal psi for fixed sprays and vans as well. And then it also has a check valve in the bottom, so it helps with low head drainage. When the system shuts off, the entire water doesn't drain out the low head. Now, I'm not going to lie, a head like this is probably going to be $5 more than a sprinkler like this. This one right here, just your regular old off-the-shelf pop-up sprinkler. What we've got here is we put pressure regulators on here, so this is in a few minutes, and we put the variable arc nozzle on, which I think we overuse in our industry. I think we way overuse those. We should be really thinking about what we're doing. They're great as a tool, but we shouldn't be using them everywhere because they really don't have good uniformity. This is going to show us that even with 90 psi coming in, this guy is going to hold it at 30. So every single sprinkler on that zone is going to be operating at 30 psi. This one you're going to see on the pressure gauge when we've been fooling around is about 60, 65, 70. And if that's the first sprinkler on the zone, you can imagine what you're getting downstream. There's inconsistencies, so very, very poor distribution uniformity. Plus, when the pressure is too high, water is misting out of the sprinkler. And if we get just a little bit of wind like we do in Kansas, water's going right off the side. Very poor uniformity. Okay? So, did I say everything we wanted to say?
We do have a pressure regulator here at 60, so.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a Hunter pressure. Now, these are great at the valve, but they are not going to hold back 120, 90 psi forever. These, you know, if you've got that kind of pressure, you've got to regulate it at the source. Okay. So yeah, I get. Oh, and then we've got a gauge here that shows what the psi is. So with that,
Austin, I'm gonna call you out.
oh yeah, get Austin. Yeah.
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 We're gonna turn this system on.
Yep.
I want you to tell the group what our pressure is at.
Yeah, whoops, we should have warned you guys. Sorry about that. That was.
We're, PSI coming in. Yeah, full fit, yep. And then what do we have here on our regulated stem?
On the Hunter, we have 30 psi.
Right.
And on the non-regulated, we have about 60.
There we go. Sorry, now look at this. What is that, 90, right?
Yeah, now we have 90.
Yeah. Okay, so 90. We have this regulated here at 60, but this is a regulated stem, right? 30. And what you can kind of tell, if I do that one, you can see a little bit more misting.
Can you see the misting?
Higher pressure. If the wind was really blowing, you would see that really blow off where you're trying to direct your water. And here's a little bit larger droplets.
Which is what you want because it's going to exit the nozzle and drop down. Now, if you have wind, I mean, but this does a beautiful job of showing you the difference. And once you have that information, like I said, you know, it's up to us as an industry. If our lay people see us doing things incorrectly, they're going to do it too. We have got to take our education and pass it on to the consumer. If they decide that's what they want, you've done your job. Okay. Anything? Thanks, Austin.
No problem.
It's good to see you, by the way. Questions? Comments? You want to see anything else?
Really see it now. That wind pick up, that misting off. That one not as bad.
So the other thing, now we haven't fired up the rotors, but just here again, something to bear in mind. It costs a little bit more. If you want to know exactly, Ellen Rourke can tell you from Site 1 probably. But if we had pressure regulators on this I-20, that I-20, it has a 45 PSI regulator in the stem. And if you look, and if you don't know how to use these charts, you need to know how to use these charts. But it'll always show you in bold that 45 PSI is the optimal operating pressure for I-20s and PGP Ultras. Because that's what they've determined, you know, on site in the lab. So that, if we had a gauge on that as well, it would be holding that at 45 PSI versus a non-pressure regulated, just a PGP, PGJ, that kind of stuff. Okay, so you pay a little bit more, but like anything in life, you get what you pay for.
A few questions before the group heads off?
Just out of curiosity before you head off. Yeah, oh wait, there's questions.
How about the turf quality and the research for the soil moisture sensors and
Oh yeah, so when we talk...
Oh, do you need
I
this?
missed that. So,
I don't know whether you need that.
I missed that. So the soil moisture sensors plot or treatment was always maintaining the quality that we desire in the golf course fairway conditions. That was our minimum criteria. So throughout the experiment period for 45 days in first year and 90 days in second year, innovation was able to maintain that fairway quality throughout the experiment time.
Other questions?
I did a similar study with zoysia with Meyer. We looked at percent green cover using soil moisture sensors versus a traditional, like irrigating 1 inch per week, really wasting water more than it needs. And we were able to maintain within 5% of percent green cover the entire season by using that soil moisture data. So really able to really know when we needed to apply that water without overdoing it.
Just one last question.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, on the soil moisture sensors, what kind of parameters you have? One out of 1,000 square foot, or you have one every 10 feet?
Good question.
A difficult, this will measure about the size of the volume of a basketball.
Oh.
And that's it.
Yeah.
So now if you think about entire area, how many, that's what we're always getting at. How many do you need? Depends on, how homogeneous your system is. We know there's a lot of research that looks at, okay, maybe we should need to put this in a representative area. Maybe you put it actually in the driest and the wettest area and kind of an average area. But it's a tool in the toolbox. It's not the silver bullet. It's a tool in the toolbox, at least to give you data. It's very teachable too. I've always heard, if you're using data, it's really makes life easier, right? Using data takes all the guesswork out of it. So it's just a tool in the toolbox.